So today we're going to talk about HM, and HM should be a review for most of you. For those of you who had CogPsych, that's for sure. And so let's talk about him, and we're going to talk about him in the context of clinical dissociation. So that's how we're going to get started with types of memory. Okay, as the syllabus course schedule would show. So let's switch. Here's the view. I'm gonna use this Word document to type things for you, and the captions are gonna be up there. Let's center everything. Center. We're ready. I think we're ready. Okay, so here is this dashing young man, Henry Molaison. Okay. So I'll talk about him in just a few minutes. But to get us started, let's talk about what a clinical dissociation is. So in chat, let me know what you think a clinical dissociation is. Would it be detachment from your surroundings? Are you, Peyton, are you answering what the clinical dissociation question is? I'm having kind of a mixed bag here in chat. Detaching from experiences. Okay, that's what you were referring to. Dissociation is when you experience things but don't remember experiencing them, like blacking out. That would be a disassociation. That would be a disassociation. Not dissociation. Disassociation. There we go. Thanks, caption. So a clinical dissociation, good tries, Peyton and Paige. A clinical dissociation is when an effect. Well, when we compare, we're going to try to compare two things here. When we compare two things, when we notice the effect of one thing doesn't affect the other thing, and when this thing doesn't affect the first thing. Okay, so this effect doesn't affect this, and this effect doesn't affect this. So, okay, Peyton. It's fair if you're both in the same place. Probably same thing, reduce quality or refresh the page. Or you can download the mobile app. So clinical dissociation here is determining a person as a result of an illness, trauma, or other physical damage shows impaired performance on certain types of memory tasks, but has intact performance on another. Okay, so impairment, intact. Okay. Now the idea with this dissociation came from the fact that brain trauma was starting to show some patterns. And those patterns were, oh, this person is deficit in this one thing, but not in this other thing. Those things tended to be episodes of events versus general knowledge. Those things tended to be. And prior to HM, that good looking guy over there, prior to HM, there wasn't really a systematic way of measuring all of this. And the view of memory was that it was a unitary conceptual object in somebody's mind. That there was one type of memory, and the process of remembering something was from a single conceptual process inside the mind. Okay, and it was described in much the same way as you have one heart for your cardiovascular system. You have one nose for your external breathing apparatus. And that was it. Most memory researchers did this, and we'll talk in a couple of weeks about how Ebbinghaus basically started this conversation of a unitary memory. But it wasn't until HM that clinical dissociations of memory deficits, so memory impairment in one realm, did not affect memory impairment in another realm. Okay? So, things to know, and you tell me if you can't see this. Clinical dissociations. It'd be helpful to spell. I can make it bigger if you need. 200. There we go. Clinical dissociations. Clinical dissociations is memory unitary or something else. HM is who we're going to talk about to describe how dissociations gave us a bigger picture, a better picture of memory. Okay, so Henry Molaison. The stuff that I write in this document, by the way, the stuff that I write in here is things that you should put in your note. Things that I think you should put in your notes. Okay. And then you can just add to them when I say stuff. Okay. And this is generally speaking how class is going to work with the whiteboard we did on Friday. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to Henry Molaison. All right, so, and let me hover over him so he gets a little bit bigger. So this good-looking guy, and honestly, I think he is a great-looking guy. The old man that he was in the 1990s, like white hair, reminds me of my grandfather. Maybe that's why I like him so much. And I think he's a good-looking guy. It's because he kind of reminds me of my grandfather. He had more hair in the 1950s than my grandfather did, but oh well. That comparison there. So anyways, and he died in 2008, which I think is amazing. Amazing. Hey, Bill. Welcome in. So again, review, but if you don't know anything about HM, he is a modern marvel. A modern marvel. And thanks for the host, Bill. Modern marvel. So when he was younger, he suffered from incredibly debilitating epilepsy. He would constantly have seizures. It wouldn't matter where he was or what he was doing. They were intractable. So the medicine at the time would not treat it at all. So the drugs at the time were not treating it at all. And any other non-invasive treatments weren't working either. So, and part of it had to do with the fact that it was idiopathic, and so his doctors didn't really know what the cause was. And something as similar is currently affecting my sister. Luckily, modern medication is helping her. We don't actually know what is causing her seizures, and then the same thing is true of HM here. Was true of HM. So he had epilepsy. It was intractable to treatment, and they were able to use EEG, electroencephalography, to figure out where the seizure started. Does anybody need a little bit of a primer on what a seizure is? Because I can explain that too if you need. or if we're all good on that one, I can just move on. But in any case, they tracked the start of the seizures to his medial temporal lobes. Oh, we can bring Brian. Kerrigan, I want you to know that I brought Brian home, and I've been calling him Brian since you named him. And he's been very useful. He's been very useful in describing certain things on stream. Bill, seizure is sort of a spectrum, isn't it? Oh yeah, sure. It's a spectrum disorder. It's essentially once you have 2 seizures, you have epilepsy. That's the clinical diagnosis. This is seriously, this is your legacy. And I do need to remember to bring Brian back to school, because imagine if I was doing this and I had to draw a brain for you all. Oh. Woo! If I had to draw a brain for you all, my God. He'd probably just walk out of the classroom at that point. Okay, so the medial temporal lobe, this is green, so which is why it's getting green screened out. Medial temporal lobe well, actually, let me get in there, taking him apart. Oh, feel bad for you. Bad for you. Okay, medial temporal lobe. Right in here. Right in here. Oh, yeah. So, on both sides of his body, of his brain. So, in both sections of the inside of the medial lobe, okay, are places where was the place where his seizures were starting. Okay. Clear this out of my desk space here. So in here was where his seizures were starting. Okay. And so his doctors were like, well, since it's intractable to pretty much everything that we've been attempting to do, we need to excise that. We need to take it out. Okay. We need to just completely get rid of it. Okay. Yeah, Duke, that's right. So we need to take that out. Now, what's in your medial temporal lobe is a structure called the hippocampus. It's just embedded in there. And so for in HM's case, they removed his medial temporal lobe in what's called a lobectomy. So, from what I understand, left was 95% removed, and then right was 75% removed. Something like that. I think the figures could be reversed. Okay. I can turn it down, Hannah. So, I could have it backwards. Let me see if his Wikipedia page has the actual answer. No, it doesn't. That's a bummer. Oh, yes, I can. Thank you, sir. But it would be right here. So I don't think I will. It would be right there, and it's not. So we're just going to go with my potentially wrong numbers. It's not important. What's important is to note that the vast majority of both sides of his brain, his medial temporal lobes, were removed. Which means that the vast majority of his hippocampi, one on each side, was removed. And that's striking, because the good news is that, and I can show you this picture here, where the hippocampus is, right? So it's this coming down here, this one right here. It alleviated his symptoms. He was able to go back to work. He had the occasional seizure. But it was like he was a new man. And he literally was a new man, because he had what is now referred to as Anterograde Amnesia. So there are two kinds. Oops. So, you might be familiar with retrograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia is not remembering stuff that has happened in the past. So, a way that we can identify this is by talking about time, by drawing some arrows. The arrow of time here. Of course you would do that word. Okay. So retrograde is right here, whereas anterograde is on this side. So here's where the brain trauma has occurred, this moment in time. And yes, we will call his surgery brain trauma. It's not like he got it done involuntarily, like he got smacked upside the head, or he got bathtub surgery'd his hippocampus out, his medial temporal lobes. But he did have serious brain trauma. Okay, that's not under debate. And so for him, he no longer could make new memories. And this is called anterograde amnesia, not being able to form new memories. He had some mild retrograde amnesia. I think about 3 years. So from the period, so the surgery occurred in 1953. And he lost about 3 years prior to that. So his retrograde amnesia, and honestly, it's odd that they call this mild. 3 years of his life. So from the period of about 1950 to up to the surgery, he couldn't remember the events of his life. But he couldn't remember anything that would happen to him after the surgery. And so mild retrograde amnesia, severe anterograde amnesia. Okay, severe anterograde amnesia. And so we'll talk about the dissociation of the memory in just a minute. But I do want to point out that removing your medial temporal lobes, in much the same way that I've done to Brian here, and removing your medial temporal lobes... Oh, sorry, I grabbed the wrong piece. In much the same way that Brian here is missing, will not affect your general knowledge. It will not affect your IQ. It will not affect your language production. He was perfectly fine in talking, okay? And it will not affect, particularly for him, it did not affect his knowledge about himself and other things that he learned prior to 1950. prior to his retrograde amnesia, right? So severe, could not remember any new events or knowledge after surgery. And then retrograde amnesia was mild. 1953 surgery. Lost. Okay. So whenever you watch a soap opera, just as an aside, whenever you watch a soap opera, and they're like, "Who am I? What am I doing here? Who are you? What do I know?" That's retrograde amnesia. And a very poor adaptation of it. And it has never been shown to be found in an actual human. There has been no observed cases of a soap opera amnesic in the real world. So it's completely farcical. And in the movie Memento, it's actually Anterograde amnesia that the main character suffers from, not retrograde. So if you're none of you are in Cog Psych, I don't believe, concurrently. But we're watching that one. And so I do recommend it if you want to know more about Anterograde amnesia. I like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind for human memory better as a way to describe it. Okay. Any questions so far about Anterograde or retrograde amnesia? Does anybody know anyone with this kind of amnesia? Oh yeah. 51st Dates is so bad at actual. So that's Anterograde amnesia with a dumb twist, right? Her day resets when she goes to sleep. No, that's not how it works. That is not how it works. Your brother had some since his car accident, Cat? Oh my goodness. Which direction? Retro or Antero? That's rough. The good news is, retro can potentially come back. So things lost due to retrograde amnesia can potentially come back, which lends further support, like I was talking about on Friday, lends further support to the idea that forgetting is potentially just retrieval errors, or retrieval failures. So, that's why I like retrieval failures as a explanation for forgetting. If it made it in, it's probably still there, unless your brain has been completely taken apart for some reason. Both, actually. Wow. Anterograde is worse than retro. Whoa. Sounds like somebody needs to become a memory researcher, Kat. I know you would totally want to do that. No, I know it in my heart. I know it. A friend had issues where he couldn't remember events about 2 hours after he woke up. His doctors thought it was due to a large number of concussions. Yes, it is that TBI. Definitely the traumatic brain injuries. Yes. So much is not known about CTE, chronic traumatic encephalography, which is what concussions are, and a lot of them over time. So anybody who plays a contact contact sport with their head will know about CTE quite a bit. So football players, soccer players. There are memory issues that we have seen, but so these are only clinical case studies. So there has been no wide study showing the amnesic effects of CTE or TBI yet. I'm sure as we get more and more people who are donating their brains to science will show us that we can have that these kind of memory effects can come from like pure pocketing of brain matter. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Hannah, you're also ripping on 51st Dates, but there's a girl who wakes up every day not remembering who she was or anything after getting hit in the head with a softball. Yeah, I'm ripping on 51st Dates because it's not accurate. Whether or not there was a actual person there, that I don't know if that's true. Caitlin Little. I'll look her up. But 51st Dates is bad. It's a bad movie. It's a bad movie and it's not accurate. It's not an accurate representation of human memory. So yeah, I will continue to rip on it. As much as I like vintage Adam Sandler or vintage Drew Barrymore, it's not a good movie. Okay. Let me drop in chat if there's any more questions. All right. So where's this clinical dissociation headed? Well, HM, being a good sport he was, being a very nice man, being a good sport, allowed himself to be studied. So Scoville and I have her name right here. Brenda Milner and Milner did the first set of studies on HM. And they wanted to determine if all of his memory was messed up or what. What is the deal? It's actually very important because before that, nobody really knew that we had short-term memory and long-term memory. Remember that model that I showed you on Friday was from 1968. HM predates that. Okay? So they didn't have any idea about that. So they wanted to see whether or not his entire memory was messed up or what about the Anterograde amnesia was caused. And it's very important because if it wasn't for Scoville and Milner, we wouldn't know at that point that the hippocampus is really important for memory formation. Okay, so we're going to focus on that dissociation first. Okay, so HM. This is what he could and could not do. So at this point, a unitary model of memory. It's all one thing. And really, the unitary model of memory was what we would consider long-term memory now. Okay, the storage bin. Okay. And so the original interpretation from Scoville and Milner was that his short-term memory system, that is the holding area, the conscious awareness that we talked about in class on Friday, was damaged, but not his long-term memory, right? Because he could still remember the vast majority of his previous life prior to the surgery. And so they wanted to determine, okay, what about his short-term memory is broken? Okay, so the first thing they had him do was a simple digit span task. Okay, and digit span, you're going to be doing something similar, but a little bit more complicated. So digit span is literally a series of numbers. Okay. Now, that's a very long string of numbers, but that is a digit span task. Now, we did know in the late 1950s that... where's my... I want to cap it right here. Separate these into... Okay. And then let's add another number there. Okay, cool. No, let's spice it up a bit. Okay. So here I have 3 strings of 7 numbers. Okay. 3 strings of 7 numbers. And in 1956, psychologists determined that 7 was some sort of magical number with memory. George Miller, we'll talk about George Miller later, but George Miller was like 7 plus or minus 2. So anywhere from 5 to 9 digits was a typical digit span for a neurotypical participant. Okay. And for really lots and lots of people, I'm not going to say everyone because there are individual differences. Because once you get to 9, accuracy of the string in the right order, it has to be in the right order. You can't just say, in this string here, for example, you can't just say 5763516. Like, that's not the right order. So the digit span has to be reported back in the order that it was given. And once you get to 9, order and number become too much information. And so a neurotypical person can't do much beyond 9. Neurotypical, average. Okay. And that's just a single presentation, by the way. That's just a single presentation. Okay. And so short-term memory was believed to be about this length. I could add a couple of numbers here or subtract a couple of numbers depending on the individual differences of the person. But HM, who did have conscious awareness of his life, like he could still interact with people and still think about things and still bring things back into conscious awareness from long-term memory. He could do it. He could do the same thing. Okay? He could do the same thing. However, if he was asked to delay, okay, if he was asked to delay, he would not be able to do it at all. Now, a neurotypical person, after a delay, can probably do it. Okay? Because the connection between short-term memory, that is the arrow that I drew from STM to LTM on the board on Friday, is intact. For HM, that line isn't intact. That line isn't intact. Just, is that why phone numbers are as long as they are? Well, I don't know if that was intentional. Because phone numbers used to be much smaller, and then we started needing more and more phone numbers, and so if you add more numbers and allow them to repeat, then the permutations of the phone numbers, and then you add, then we started needing more phone numbers for the areas that people were in. That's when area codes came in, and so now we have 10-digit phone numbers. I don't think it has anything to do with. Our social security numbers are 9 digits, and each of those chunks has meaning. Each of those chunks have meaning, but I don't think it has anything to do with like somebody's ability to remember it. But it's a fair question. It's like a chicken and egg kind of thing. Kind of like a chicken and egg kind of thing, which nice, just fun. It's a fun philosophical question. So the point I want to make about HM and this STM LTM difference. So actually, I want to write this down. Okay, so for NT, that's how I'm going to refer to neurotypicals. That's probably the abbreviation that I will use on the board as well, on the whiteboard once we get back in class. So NT, 7 plus or minus 2, okay, digits. Can remember, even with delay. Okay. HM, on the other hand, yeah, he had 7 plus, oops, that's an equal sign. 7 plus or minus 2 digits. but can't recall if delay at, actually, I'm going to write that in another way, but can't recall for any delay amount. And that's because, so NT, we have STM, annoying, STM to LTM, but then we also have it, too far, we have it going backwards, so let's do this. There we go. That looks so bad. Next month, I'm gonna have a scribe pad. I mean, it's not gonna help me for class, but we have to do this again. Anyways, HM on the other hand, STM. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Have it on this side. LTM. But he could go back. He could go back the other way. Right? So that slash is meaning that it's broken. The slash means that it's broken. I wish I could draw something better, but I'm not going to attempt to try to draw with the mouse. That's just asking for issues. Okay. So that's digit span. And so that is the first bit of information that we get from HM. One, psychologists say that, okay, there has to be 2 types of memory because this is a clinical dissociation between HM and neurotypical participants. Okay? As a result of his lobectomies, his bilateral lobectomies, medial temporal lobe, okay, as a result of that, he could no longer transfer information from short-term memory, that is conscious awareness, what he's currently doing, what he's currently thinking about, into LTM for storage. He can go grab the storage. He can go get that information from prior to 1950 and bring it back into conscious awareness, like where were you born? What's your name? You know, where do you live now? What's your job? Whereas neurotypicals don't have any issue with that. Okay. So this is the first bit of evidence that there is not a unitary memory system. Not a unitary memory system. Okay. Questions about that? We're going to talk more about HM on Wednesday. We're going to talk more about HM on Wednesday. Any questions about this first distinction, this first type of memory distinction? Drop that in chat. Wish I had more clear LaCroix. I gotta put Brian back together while I'm waiting for questions to come up. Put my brains back together. Put my brains back together. If I could only get it back together. Yes, I know how this goes back together. What are you insinuating? Wow, okay. Well, there we go. Is anybody confused by the description of the distinction here between what neurotypicals and HM can do? By the way, he because he was such a awesome dude and wanted to help out with science enough, he donated his brain to UCSD, University of California, San Diego, where they could slice it into sections. And then that got moved to UC Davis. So cool. Such a good dude. That was part of his will. He donated his brain after his death for that. All right, so if there aren't any questions, we're probably going to leave the stream there a little bit early. Look at you all. Look at that. That's amazing. So we're gonna leave it there. Let me know if you have any questions. Keep thinking about your procedural memory. Any questions about that? Also, I can leave. We have 5 minutes left in class. But you are welcome to also ask me administrative questions as well, if you still want to stick around. Sarah asks, my video has been jumpy. What caused HM not to store in LTM? Yes, it was the removal of the hippocampus, Sarah. And as far as your video being choppy, you could reduce the resolution of your stream. That might help if your internet is a bit spotty. But that's a good question. Yes, it was the hippocampus. Scoville and Milner did not necessarily make that argument back in 1954, I think is when this study came out. The paper came out. I don't think they went as far as saying that, but follow-up research definitely was like, whoa, yeah, hippocampus is really important here. They do say the hippocampus is really important in their paper. I had to read it in grad school. But they don't go as far as saying it's the end-all, be-all structure for memory formation, because they only had one person, right? They only had one person. It took more research to make a more definitive conclusion about the hippocampus's job. Was he aware that he was no longer able to remember things that were happening? That is a really good question, Hannah. So my understanding is that he was cognizant. So he was aware that he had memory difficulties. In kind of the same way as the main character in Memento, who constantly goes around telling people, I have this condition. And so I believe he was aware that he had memory difficulties, and he was such a good-natured guy that he would just ask people to be, patient with him and all that sort of stuff. But I think he also wanted to be... I think he also wanted to know more about his condition, which is why he was so ready. And here I'm just speculating, which is why he was probably so ready to participate in these research projects for the next 2 or 3 decades. I don't remember. I don't know exactly when he stopped. Oh, and actually, yeah, he was several decades. He kept going. That's awesome. Jesse, so the hippocampus was removed, but his medial temporal lobes were just separated. I don't know what you mean by that question. Think of it as, so you got to think of it as a 3D structure, right? And so essentially what they removed were cylindrical in shape, right? So if I were to go like this up to the camera, cylindrical in shape, maybe not this big, but that was essentially what was removed, right? And then the brain itself kind of fills the vacuum because it's gelatinous, so it like collapsed in on itself. Somewhat. And so the medial temporal lobe is the name of the brain area, where the hippocampi, the parahippocampi, the entorhinal, and piriform cortices are. Okay. Not 100% of his amygdalae were removed, but a little bit of that was removed. Like one side was almost completely removed. Yeah, so the medial temporal lobe includes these structures. It says 2/3. There you go. 2/3. So if you combine the right and the left removal, it amounted to 2/3 of its entire medial temporal lobe area. Yeah. Oh, Hannah, you know somebody with Broca's aphasia? That's really interesting. And you can't tell if, yeah. And with Broca's aphasia, it's really difficult because of production. They can't, it's difficult for them to express themselves to other people. So maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they're going to have difficulty intimating that. And it's likely if they don't know, if they can't write it out, and be coherent in written form, then there's probably additional deficits. Sarah, your grandmother has Broca's aphasia, and she does know what's going on, but she cannot say things correctly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, okay. Thanks for the questions and the comments, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and end it there.